I'm Paul Wessel from the Greater New Haven Clean Cities Coalition, and we're one of 3 coalitions across Connecticut and one of 75 across the country focused on promoting cleaner fuel transportation. We're a project of the Department of Energy. It's really exciting to live in a time where creative, smart people are figuring out how to move us and our stuff around in ways that don't poison our air or threaten our shoreline or undermine our farms. If you haven't experienced it as a driver of a Kia Niro EV, I can tell you that it's got incredibly quiet, zippy pickup. Like most electric vehicles, it's like piloting a spaceship. My first experience, it felt like moving from a PC to a Mac. It did everything that my regular car had done, but much more elegantly. And we're here today to talk about the fact that the technology charging our EVs is getting quicker and smarter and more ubiquitous. And it's even possible now, as you will hear, to power your home for a few days from your vehicle back through the charger. So with this rapid evolution and the flurry of government and private activity pushing the electric vehicle revolution forward, it's important that the people installing EV chargers, EVSE in the industry's terms, are up to date on the safety and technical requirements necessary to do that. So we're happy to see that the feds are requiring installer training for work in Connecticut and elsewhere that's funding. And it recognized the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program, a mouthful I know, EVITP, as the gold standard in its most recent funding guidance. So I'm delighted to introduce Jennifer Mefford and Bernie Kotlier, the national co-chairs of the EVITP, to explain more about the program and how it supports EV charging infrastructure rollout across the country. We'll go on for about 45 minutes of their presentation and open up for questions afterwards. You can type questions anytime in the chat box. Please make sure to keep your microphone muted, and rest assured we'll be sending out a link to the recording of today's presentation and a copy of the slides to everyone who's registered. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jennifer and Bernie. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Paul. We appreciate the opportunity to join the group today. As I can see folks coming into the call, I think I've been on calls with many of you before, so it's great to be here with you again virtually. Bernie and I are happy to share with you an overview of the program today and then open it up just for some dialogue. We'd love to hear your thoughts also on kind of where the market's at today. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides from my screen that we will be chatting through, and then we will look more towards questions, as Paul said, in about 45 minutes. Bernie, did you want to start with any opening remarks before we get rolling?
Just to follow up on yours, Jen, we really appreciate this opportunity to speak to everyone today. I'd like to thank Paul and everyone at Clean Cities who made this possible. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So we'll just jump right in. These numbers are numbers we typically share with groups that we address, just about where charging is heading. And, this group, I think, is very, ensconced in this space. So we don't need to spend a ton of time on this. But obviously, we're all seeing across the United States and really globally the expansion of EV and charging infrastructure to support the expansion of the EV industry. I feel like we're all in conversations about, how much is the market going to grow, how quickly, how fast, what is it going to look like from a charging perspective to support that market. And I think everyone is kind of looking, at different sets of numbers, but certainly these numbers reflected here show significant growth over the next 10 years. And I think we can all agree that that's going to happen. I am based in the Detroit, Michigan market. So we do have the big 3 here, and are working on, and have completed 2 electric vehicle plant conversions, one for General Motors and one for Ford. And I think that one of the big shifts for me, being, in the EV space for a long time, is that now that the shift in manufacturing has really taken place in research and development and kind of the whole battery supply chain all of it. I think when billions of dollars are spent, we know there's going to be a much more robust market than we've seen in the last 10 years. This is the announcement from Ford and a beautiful picture of the Ford F-150 all-electric Lightning. Another big announcement, but I'm continuing to kind of have conversations at my market level with the automakers about just more and more products in their portfolio coming out quickly. Plant conversions, we have another one scheduled here in the Detroit area that will be starting in the fall. So it's a really exciting time, I think, to see the growth that all of us that have worked in and around this space for so long have been hoping for. This slide is probably outdated as we're speaking about it today, that there are 37 plus vehicles that are electric available today for consumers. And there are more coming, but really it's very tough to keep up with all the announcements and the excitement around this space. And really the passion, I think, that the automotive industry is bringing to the electrification of mobility. I, for one, I am a car girl. I love my automobiles. And I love seeing all of these announcements and all these really innovative and really exciting products coming out. This is a project in the Ohio area that is an electric bus, and we're starting to see certainly more conversations around electric mass transit, electrified school bus systems, and I'm sure that you're seeing those in your areas as well. But it's very exciting, and in so many ways, I think we're all just kind of on the beginning of what this upward curve is going to look like. We do have one of the first road. There's 3 of these in the world. This will be the 3rd one. The first wireless EV charging roadway in the U.S. will be built near Michigan Central Station, which is being completely redone and built for Ford's mobility hub. So Ford will be locating all of their autonomous vehicles as well as their electrification divisions from the suburbs of the Detroit area into downtown. In about a 6-mile campus and a $1 billion project build out. And this electrified roadway will serve as a test track for inductive charging for typically freight vehicles and more larger size vehicles. So pretty cool. We are set to break ground on that also beginning in the fall of this year. As Paul indicated, there's a lot going on, and I know that so many of you are in this space every day. You're seeing this rapid transformation of the industry. Charging is changing, it's getting faster, it's getting sleeker, easier to have more options for customers. And I think that's great. So no matter what market that you're in, whether you're a residential customer, public fleet, it's all there for you. So it's changing so quickly. So very exciting time. PG&E, and I'm sure many of you are watching this in your professional careers as well, that PG&E and GM are testing electric vehicles for home energy storage right now and deploying a pilot in California. And I think looking at what that looks like in terms of functionality and also consumer experience, the introduction of bidirectional charging, where we're taking power going really both ways from the home to the vehicle and then from the vehicle back into potentially your home, I think is really exciting and something that consumers are going to just absolutely love. Of course, we're seeing more call even in my market in the heart of the Midwest for solar integration into charging configurations as well as energy storage. So, my work in this space began just before the launch of the Chevy Volt. So it's very exciting for me to see all of the things that we talked about happening then happening in reality today. I love pictures of pretty charging equipment. So many of the different types of configurations that we see, there are many, many more out there. And I'm sure many of you work with those companies as well. Fleet vehicles, school buses. I'm very excited to continue to see the evolution of the vehicles, which I think the more choice and certainly the more variety that are available for all applications for consumers will help this market grow significantly. So as I mentioned, my work in this space began right around the time, about 2 years before the launch of the Chevy Volt. And that's really where this idea of a collaboration around training developed, which into what became EVITP. It started with me working with a group of engineers from General Motors, getting ready to launch that Volt in conversations, knowing they were going to launch in 2011 or 12, and really kind of helping to work with them, very, very fortunate to work with them to convene other automakers, battery makers, investor-owned and municipal utilities, of course, EVSE equipment, charging station manufacturers, and there were quite a few at that point, new folks kind of coming into the space, electrical inspectors, first responders, and of course, electrical contractors and electrical workers, electricians, to look at what does this market, the EV mobility market, really need from a charging perspective for installation to make sure that everything is done at the highest levels of safety and the best customer experience in any market. So whether you are a personal consumer or a commercial consumer, that there was an infrastructure there to support your expansion into the market. The original partner advisors, and many are still with us today, that came together are reflected on this slide. There are more than this, but this is a good snapshot of kind of who helped to come together at that original time and look at this from how do we make sure that this market is supported at the highest level with the highest regard to safety and customer experience. So a lot of these folks helped us develop our curriculum and still help today. I think one of the cool things about EVITP is that we are in our fourth iteration of our curriculum because we are able to evolve and adapt with the changes in the market. And a lot of that is based on our feedback from our industry partners. Our next version of our curriculum is currently being worked on, and we'll certainly be rolling that out because there are so many new advances into the industry as well. So I just wanted you to kind of share with that information with you about how we got started. Bernie's going to pick up now and walk you through what's in the curriculum and a little bit more about the program specifically. Bernie?
Thank you, Jen. Yes, so on to the curriculum. The EVITP curriculum is in its fourth generation, and as Jennifer said, we are currently working on the fifth generation. That'll be available later this year. The curriculum is very comprehensive. It covers everything from residential to commercial, industrial, DC fast charging, as you've seen. Very comprehensive curriculum, and it even is, as also Jen pictured, training on the latest wireless inductive charging equipment. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, that's across the board. This slide just gives you a little more information on the range of voltages, everything from basic house current all the way up to and over 1,000 volts DC. Next, please. So this gives, I think, a really good insight into what electricians, just one of the things that electricians have to master to get their EVITP certification. These are calculation formulas that are required to perform site assessments and load calculations, and they are critical to the safe and effective installation of EVSE. We'll talk more about that when we get to safety, but that gives you an insight as to the kind of math that electricians have to master. So why should a electrician take the EVITP course? Why should a government entity require it? Why should contractors send their electricians to EVITP? There's a lot of good reasons. And you see there that safety is repeated 3 times. That wasn't a typo. That's because really that is our primary, first and foremost, to protect people. But when you do safety well, when you master all the technical aspects of installation and commissioning and maintenance, safety is, of course, the premier concern, but you also get great performance and reliability. And when installations are done safely, it reduces risk for everyone. Once again, for the people who are in and around these chargers, the people who are working on them, also the property, but it also reduces risks for governments and for insurance companies and financial institutions, and for the whole EV industry. Because when EV industry performs safely, we get greater adoption and faster growth. So, as I said, safety is our first and foremost concern. When we show this slide, we're often accused of being overly dramatic, and I wish it were. But unfortunately, we've had some incidents that that have contributed to the creation of EVITP, and that's one of the reasons why safety is our premier concern. Next slide, Jen. These next two photos show a laboratory situation where wiring is overloaded by the charging of an electric vehicle. And as I'm sure all of you know, those batteries are getting bigger and bigger. And of course, now with the new F-150 Lightning, those batteries are powerful enough to energize a home for up to 3 days. So these are big loads. And when you put big loads on existing wiring, some of which may be, decades old, unfortunately, fires can start. And even though this is a lab experiment and supposedly theoretical, unfortunately, it has happened. You'll see in the next slide, and these are photographs that were provided to us by utilities as examples of what happens when you overload circuits. And this photo that you're seeing here is a situation that happened in Connecticut in 2011. That vehicle in the foreground is a Chevy Volt, and the fire did not start in the Volt as was initially reported. When the fire marshal did the investigation, they found that that fire was started in the walls of the building, and that's because the charging of the Volt overloaded those circuits. So, and this was one of the initial fires in 2011 that prompted General Motors and the other automakers to reach out to the electrical contracting industry to make sure that electricians were trained to do this work safely. Next slide. So I'm often asked, well, is EVITP the only training program? Aren't there a lot of others? And the answer is, of course, there are many training programs that touch on the EVSE installation and maintenance. But EVITP is very different in that EVITP is a comprehensive program that really focuses on the areas that a lot of other training programs don't focus on. Things like the code, end-site assessment and load calculations, the safety aspects, ADA requirements. EVITP is meant to provide the type of training that generally manufacturers and networking companies don't really focus on. They have great training. It tends to be proprietary. Generally, their training is focused on their equipment, and that's great. And we encourage graduates of EVITP who are going to work on a specific manufacturer's equipment to take their course as well. Next slide. So who is eligible to take the EVITP training and get certified? There are really two categories. In states that or local jurisdictions where they have licensing or certification of electricians, the electrician must have that credential to take the course. In states where they do not license or certify electricians, they have to have the equivalent, which is 8,000 hours of on-the-job experience to take EVIT and become certified. Next. Thank you, Jen. So a couple of quick things on workforce. Another thing that we're often asked about is, well, are there enough electricians to do this work to meet the president's goal of roughly 500,000 charging stations or more nationally? Are there enough electricians, and are there enough electricians who are EVITP certified to do this job? So what you're seeing here is a summary of the results of a survey that was done of contractors around the country based on how many chargers of different types and different categories, all the way from residential up to DC fast charging, how many they can install in a certain amount of time, how long it'll take to meet these goals. And we ran through two scenarios in these surveys, and they were both based on 500,000 charging stations. The first one, as you can see here, was split roughly evenly between level 2 and DC fast chargers, 250,000 each. And the basis for the EVITP requirement was a 1-to-1 ratio with apprentices. And the working year was based on 48 weeks, which was leaving 4 weeks off for vacation and other time. Next slide, please. So the multifamily and residential and commercial level 2, you see here the ratios. I won't go through all the details. These slides will be available to you after, but these are the results of the survey, how many electricians it takes to install it. We used very conservative numbers. And so to install 250,000 EVSE in 3 years, it took 868 teams, 1,736 EVITP certified electricians. And in the heavy commercial and industrial and DC fast charger, there's different ratio, different number of electricians here. But the bottom line is that it'd be 3,472 EVITP certified electricians to get that done. So you see here in scenario A, about 5,200 EVITP certified electricians would install those 500,000 charging stations in 3 years, and about 10,400 certified electricians would install 1 million charging stations if we were to go to those numbers to double the goal in 3 years. So the bottom line is there's plenty of electricians to do this work, and there are more than enough EVITP certified electricians nationwide to install these charging stations and meet our federal goals and even beyond. So other questions that come up, there's a lot of questions about EVITP and about the electrical trade. One of the questions that Jen and I often get is, well, is this trade really diverse? Or is there equity in the trade? And I think that the questions are based on a lot of people. Well, of course, a lot of people are just generally concerned, but some people have, an idea that the electrical trade and other trades haven't changed in the last 30 or 40 or 50 years. But in reality, they've changed tremendously. EVITP, of course, draws an electrical trade. The electrical trade is a very diverse trade now. And the electrical trade reaches out through pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship and other ways to bring candidates into the electrical trade. And it's very diverse now. This is an example of a recent scholarship opportunity that was provided by Bloomberg, where they required 50% of the scholarship recipients to be women and BIPOC over 24 US cities. And the scholarship parameters were met nationwide. That's another example of how diverse this trade is now. Next slide. So what are the benefits? When you look at EVITP, certainly you see all the benefits of safety and skill, but what are some of the community benefits and what are the impacts of the EV installations, and particularly of EVITP training and certification? EVITP is a real benefit to communities because it assists in creating and developing a dedicated and skilled and trained workforce for transportation electrification, first and foremost for safety, but it also helps to train and develop and advance the skills of workers all over the country who are involved. And it also prevents a race to the bottom. Without a requirement like EVITP for training, what happens is many companies just look for the lowest cost. Well, the lowest cost doesn't always provide adequate safety and good performance. So EVITP sets a floor and prevents that race to the bottom. And EVITP can also provide governments and other socially responsible organizations and investors an avenue to prioritize their projects using a skilled, trained, and licensed workforce. Jen?
Thanks, Bernie. So I wanted to just kind of walk through accessing training. We are asked a lot of questions. How are folks around the country accessing the training? This is our website. If you haven't already been there, evitp.org. Basically, when you come into the website, there's a section called training. You hit training, and this apply for training a section will pop up, and you'll choose your state and submit that. And then on your right, you're seeing what comes up. So given that some states have licensing and some states do not, this reads slightly differently depending on the credentialing of a given state. That a description is there, and then an application. So the electrician comes in, submits an application, and submits their credentials to qualify for the course, and then are moved through into our certification check process. So we do check all of the credentials to make sure that they are qualified to take the course. Then after that, they are once vetted and checked, they are provided a link to pay for the course and the link to take the course. Once the course is successfully completed, the electrician is scheduled for an exam. So that again is a 2-hour proctored exam, and we are currently getting ready to launch nationwide our online proctored exam functionality. And that will allow, I think, for a really seamless and scalable model as we start to get more and more folks into the system. Right now, we are able to handle the volumes that are coming in. We are absolutely staffing up and ready to go for what's coming next. So if you haven't been to the website, I do encourage you to go there and just click around on those buttons and see how the functionality works, so that you'll have a better understanding of what that process looks like. In addition to our EVITP certified electricians, EVITP also has contractors that have wanted to affiliate with our program. On the website is a Find a Contractor button. You just click on that and you'll see this map. We do have contractors in all 50 states, as well as thousands of electricians throughout the country that have the certification. We don't certify contractors, we certify electricians. But contractors are certainly encouraged and able to affiliate with us if they're utilizing EVITP certified electricians. If you're interested in this, certainly happy to have another conversation offline or answer questions in chat today on how this process to become an affiliated contractor works. Happy to walk through that. I think Paul mentioned EVITP is referenced in the NEVI Formula Program Guidebook. So many of you may have seen or heard of the program for the first time there, which is why we thought it was so important to get with you today and just kind of answer any questions that you have about the program, support the work that you're doing on any proposal writing that you're doing, and just provide any additional resources that we can. So at this point, Bernie, I'm just going to see if there's anything that you would like to add before we can reconvene with Paul and start moving towards questions. Bernie?
Sorry, Jen, I was on mute. No, I think we provide a lot of information and be really appropriate for us to give all the participants an opportunity to ask their questions and make their comments. I see some of them coming up in the chat. I know there's some good ones. So Paul, I guess you're going to MC that, and we're ready.
Great, thank you. So, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you again for everybody being here and hearing about this. So you covered some of this, but let's at least address the questions people are asking. How many hours is the training program?
20 hours.
All right. And that's currently all online, right?
That is correct. It's all online. And I noticed there were some questions about, well, how are you going to access this? Everybody can anybody can access the internet, can access the training, as long as they are qualified and eligible. And as Jen said, the exams will be online shortly in August. So we're only a few weeks away from having online exams as well. So it'll be available to everyone in the country who's eligible on their own schedule.
Okay, and people had looked at the website in the past and noticed that there was only training available in California. So you just want to talk about sort of how and when that evolution happened, just so everybody's clear?
Jen?
Sure. So if you visit the site today, you'll find that directory for all states. We rolled that out probably about 30, maybe 40 days ago on the site. And so anyone really from any state can take the training. The process is the same. The requirements by state, depending on whether or not that state has licensing, are slightly different. So when you select your state, the information for your particular state of what we are looking for in terms of credentials will pop up, and then you just fill out the application and submit it.
Great. Somebody else asked, do you work with or have you worked with state governments to get their licensed electricians certified?
Yes, the answer is we've worked with a number of state governments. There is a requirement in the state of California, which has been in existence since September of 2020. So coming up pretty soon on 2 years. And there are a number of other states that we're in correspondence with that are considering having an EVITP requirement. In addition to that, there are many other entities. There's ports, there's cities, in many parts of the country, other jurisdictions that are requiring EVITP. One of them, Jen can tell you a little bit about, close to her area in the Midwest, is the city of Columbus, and what they've been doing after they won the Smart Cities Award. Jen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that Smart Cities, award for Ohio was just tremendous, and a lot of that initial grant funding coming into the Columbus area was designated for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So EVITP was able to partner with them, with a coalition of stakeholders, to deploy equipment quickly at using the EVITP standard, and just to kind of jumpstart that market. But it was a really exciting project, and some of you may be familiar with it, but if not, I'm always happy to talk offline about how that collaboration was put together. I think it's a pretty special example of what people can do in a really short period of time to deploy infrastructure.
Great. I remember hearing about when Columbus got the award. So a couple questions about the certification itself. Does the $275 fee cover all the costs? Once completed, does the person get a physical certificate, or how do they prove that they've completed the course? And
Sure.
does EPRI recognize the certification?
So the $275 covers the course and the exam and the certification. So that's an all-in amount. Once the test is successfully passed and completed, our operations management team will issue an electronic certificate from EVITP that is sent directly to the individual. So they can print that, they can use it as an electronic copy to show, if they're doing an RFP that has a requirement, they have that documentation. We also have a database, of course, of everyone that's come through our system. So if someone loses their certificate, or they need their number, or any of those kinds of things happen, we're here. We have a customer service representative that will work with them and make sure that they have whatever they need.
And what I can add, Paul, is that here in California, where we have a statewide law, the certificate is not recognized. What is recognized is the certification check on the website, because that is electronic confirmation. The certificates are nice, and some people want to frame them or whatever, but certificates can be counterfeited. So it's really the certification check on the website that proves and validates that someone has EVITP certification.
Great. Somebody asked if there's consideration to open up the training to apprenticeship programs so that when electricians do get their final license, they're ready to go.
So the answer to that is we only train and certify electricians who are qualified. Now, there are some apprenticeship programs where the apprentices are still in class after they have completed 8,000 hours, because there are a number of programs around the country that are 5-year programs. So they may reach their 8,000 hours and or get their state license before they complete the apprenticeship. In that case, they could get EVITP certification at that time. But to be trained and certified, they must either have their state license or have achieve the 8,000 hours.
And why 8,000 hours?
Well, 8,000 hours is based on the predominant requirement across the country. We have more than half of the states have licensure requirements for electricians. I believe there's 17 states that do not have licensure requirements, but in those majority of the states where they do, 8,000 hours is the standard in almost all of those states to become what's considered a master or a journeyman electrician. They have different terms, but that's the standard.
Right.
So
Somebody asked.
Also point out,
Right.
Paul, sorry to interrupt,
ahead.
but I should also point out that, you know, one of the reasons why EVITP is in the guidance document is because the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation federally were very concerned about the fact that we have 17 states that don't have licensure. In those states, we have self-declared electricians. You literally could just say, I'm an electrician. There's no requirement for specific training or testing, just I'm an electrician. So the national application of EVITP in the guidance document, assuming it does go forward, as we said earlier in the presentation, sets a standard nationally. So people who are doing this work, whether they be public or private or whatever, who are contracting for it, know that there's a consistency. Otherwise, those 17 states, you know, you could get anybody who's self-declared.
Okay, thank you. I'm putting in the chat right now information where people can get information on the guidance document. We had posted a blog on our website about this. Currently, there's a draft guidance document from the Federal Highway Administration about what's necessary to spend the federal money, and that guidance document requires EVITP certified installers. There will be comments on that. Those comments are due August 22nd, I believe. The NEVI applications, which is the first tranche of EPA funding that this all is affiliated with, those applications are due August 1st by state DOTs. So as it stands now, EVITP training is a requirement of applications being put forward, and we're working here in Connecticut with the DOT on that, and I expect that they'll be including that in their application, and we'll see what the future holds. But at this point, it's the law of the land, effectively. Any other questions? All right, we'll be posting the webinar and the slides.
Paul?
Yeah.
I saw one earlier that I wanted to respond to.
Sorry, I missed somebody.
Yeah, well, maybe because we sort of answered it, but you know, it was about the access to the training, and you know, there are not many unions in the South, and you know, of course, Jen pointed out that training is available to everyone nationwide, but I do want to address this issue. For those of you who have the impression that this is a union program or only available to unions, that's absolutely not correct. This is an open program that's available to all electricians nationwide who meet that standard, either have the license or the 8,000 hours. So just to address that point, that question about unions, it's not a union program and it's not restricted in any way.
Great. And one question I did miss is that somebody asked, what are the benefits for somebody looking to get EVITP certification? Sort of covered this. Is the pay good? Is it easier to find work? Do you have to be hired by an EVSC company? Maybe you could go into a little bit how, you know, with so many national players, how do local installations work? How do our electricians engaged when you buy from one of the big companies?
Well, I can answer part of this, and then I'll move it over to Jen, and she can, I think, complete it. But in terms of, you know, what are the benefits for having EVITP certification, I think it's important that we reiterate that even though there's a list of contractors on the website, they are not certified. And hiring one of those contractors does not meet the EVITP requirement. That list is a public service list of contractors who are approved because they signed a document and a pledge that they're going to have EVITP electricians. The law here in California and the various cities and different places around the country is based on having the EVITP certified electrician on the job, not the contractor. No, the contractor status is not relevant to the requirement. So it's the electrician's hands-on work and their training and certification that's key. So the benefit to them is that if contractors are doing work that's funded by an entity that requires EVITP, they're going to be eligible to do that work. Does it pay more? I'm not aware of any electricians who are paid additional amount because they have EVITP certification. I'm not aware of that, haven't heard of it. But if they're working on a job that's state or city or federally funded or whatever it might be that requires EVITP certification to do the job, that electrician who has it is going to be the one who's eligible to get that job. So that's certainly a benefit. Jen, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it well. Thank you.
All right, and there's a final question, I think, from somebody up in Vermont who's saying electricians are already stretched thin in Vermont, and basically putting another burden on already trained electricians seems like it's self-defeating. May create redundancies and delays in building out the EV charging infrastructure. Comments on that?
Sure, love to comment on that. Heard that before. And the reality is that there are sufficient numbers of electricians all over the country. Maybe in a local market, they may not have the numbers that they need for a specific project at a specific time. But EVITP does not change the number of electricians. EVITP provides them with 20 hours of additional training that is specific to this advanced technology. We've heard, over the years that, well, aren't electricians already well trained enough if they're licensed or certified in the state? And the answer is they have probably 97 or 95% or 98% of what they need. But we all know that there's new technology is constantly being introduced to the market, as you said in your introduction, Paul. And that new technology does require a little bit of additional advanced training. That's why most of the states and local entities that have licensing or certification also have a continuing education requirement. So this is not something strange or special or unique. It is consistent and aligned with those most states and most local entities that require certification to also take continuing education, because they recognize that there's new technology introduced to the electrical trade on a regular basis, and electricians need to take this training. So it is consistent. And as far as, a burden, I don't think 20 hours of training is a burden. It's an advantage.
All right, could be a burden to have to pay $275 for the training. So somebody's asking if there are any grants available for that.
Jen?
We did deploy one grant for some scholarships that we talked about in our diversity slides. I can only imagine with all of the different grant programs that are floating around right now around this space that there wouldn't be some. I don't have any specifically at this moment, but I certainly would be looking to collaborate or partner with any of you who may have state monies, municipal monies, anything that's kind of active in your market. In how we could deploy that training. We always are looking to collaborate, so please reach out to us and we can have a market specific conversation. I've also seeing a question about asking if we're available to present in another market. Yes, of course we are. We do this all the time. We welcome those opportunities. Please connect with us, and you sometimes get both of us. Paul was lucky today, we were both available, or sometimes you get one or the other. but we're here to support you, to answer questions. If you all work for groups where you would like us to do a meeting for your a team, we're happy to do it. We do it all the time.
Okay, the questions keep rolling in. Go ahead, Bernie.
Paul, yeah, let me add to your to the response about the $275. You know that there have been a number of surveys recently done about the cost of this kind of trade training, and generally, on average, this type of training is about $500 for 10 hours. That's a pretty standard kind of unit cost. Typically, this kind of training would be somewhere in the $800 to $1,200 range. The reason it is only $275 is that EVITP is a nonprofit industry collaborative that was formed to help the industry be safer and grow more effectively. The only reason it's $275, it's that low, is because we have volunteers all over the country, and we have those partner advisors who provide us with technical advice and assistance, and we have volunteers who help us develop curriculum and update the curriculum. And I think it's important to also say again that we don't accept any sponsorships. We don't promote anyone's products. It's brand neutral, and EVITP is a 501c3. So we're doing this at the absolute lowest cost because of that volunteer participation.
Okay, so somebody's asking, he says electricians are only needed to make the permitted electrical connection. Why not limit them to that and use other labor for the rest?
Well, that's a position that some people take, but it does not align with the scope of work in most jurisdictions. The idea that you only need an electrician to make a final connection is a position that's taken by people who don't have the skills of electricians and want to do that work. So we don't consider that to be a credible approach, and it's certainly illegal in most states.
And currently the last question is, could you tell me when?
Paul, let me add to that. I don't know if this person who asked the question saw the whole presentation, but if an electrician were only needed to make the final connection, who, with what skill, would do the site assessment, the load calculations, the code requirements? I mean, it's far-fetched. That's a most polite way I can put it.
Right. Well, it looks like that conversation might continue offline. Somebody was asking about the test availability in August, that if they register today, can they take it online in August?
Jen?
Yes, in August. So any of you that have onboarded new technology functionality to your LMS systems know that I want to get that rolling as quickly as I can. I also want to get it rolling when it's really ready to go. So we are working towards the first part of August, and we will continue to work towards the first part of August, but it will certainly be available in August.
So what I can add to that is, for someone who hasn't started the course yet, I would encourage anyone who wants the training, needs the training, who's eligible for the training, to sign up and start taking the training. And if they work through it through the training during July and early August, when they're done, we'll be ready for the exam around that time. They shouldn't have to wait very long until that online exam function is available.
All right. Well, thank you, Jen and Bernie, for your time and for the presentation. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We'll be sending out an email after the fact with a copy of the slides that were presented today, some additional background information, and a link to the recording. So thanks again, and have a great rest of the day. And
thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you.
We'll see you in your EV soon.